Since 1969, humanity has celebrated the conquest of space as one of the greatest technological and scientific achievements of all time. The images of the Apollo 11 astronauts walking on the lunar surface were broadcast to millions of people around the world, cementing the idea that mankind had indeed overcome the barrier of the impossible. But what if this story has another side? A side hidden for decades, filled with inconsistencies, lost documents, and silenced testimonies? Each year, new evidence and testimonies emerge, suggesting that the moon landing may have actually been a carefully rehearsed spectacle. After all, what really happened behind the scenes of the Apollo 11 mission? Could NASA have faked mankind's arrival on the moon? Welcome to another night, where mysteries never sleep. I am Midnight, and this is 7 Nights. Before we begin, I'd like to ask for your help. Like the video, comment, and subscribe to the channel. It's just one click, but it makes a huge difference in helping YouTube deliver these videos to more people and allowing me to continue bringing this content to you. I'm counting on you. Let's get into the video. Now stop and think with me. If you were on the moon, where the only light source is the sun, how should the shadows look? Perfectly parallel, right? After all, in the vacuum of space, with no atmosphere to scatter light, nothing should interfere with this behavior. Alright, so far so good. But then, why do the photos from the Apollo 11 mission show shadows that seem to do whatever they want? Since the first photos of the lunar landing were released, something has seemed off to many keen observers. The shadows of astronauts and lunar modules follow conflicting directions, as if there were more than one light source. This doesn't make sense in an environment where the sun is the only available illumination. Now, you might be wondering, is this just an effect of the moon's terrain? Or is there something deeper hidden in these images? NASA has always argued that the moon's uneven surface could cause this distortion effect. But does that explanation hold up? If it were just the terrain, we should see this phenomenon in absolutely every image, right? However, in several of them, the shadows cross at impossible angles, something that would only happen if we were dealing with artificial lighting like that of a film studio. And there's more. Some photos show objects in the same scene casting shadows of different sizes. Think about this: 2 rocks side by side, one with a short shadow and the other with a disproportionately long one. How can this happen if both are being illuminated by the same light source? Could it be a mistake in the staging? A slip-up in the production of this grand spectacle? But things get even stranger when we analyze the shadows themselves. Have you ever tried looking at a shadow on a bright sunny day? It is completely dark, with no details visible inside it, right? Now look at the Apollo mission photos. The shadowed areas still show details of the ground, as if a second light source was softening the shadows. Does this make sense to you? Because on the moon, where there is no atmosphere to diffuse light, shadows should be absolutely black. So, where is this extra light coming from? And what if I told you that in the videos, the shadows shift positions between different frames? Yes, some footage shows shadows subtly shifting from one frame to another, as if the light source were being adjusted or changing direction. But how could this happen if the only available light was the sun, which doesn't move quickly like a spotlight in a film set? Now, let's talk about the overall lighting in these images. If the sun were the only light source on the moon, we should see extreme contrast between the illuminated areas and the shadows, right? But when we look at the photos, we see that the astronauts' suits glow uniformly, without large areas of darkness. Does this happen naturally, or is it a sign that reflectors were used to better light the scene? And there's another detail that goes unnoticed by many. Some experts have tried to recreate the lighting conditions of the Apollo mission photos in photography studios. The result? They struggled to replicate the exact shadow effects without using multiple light sources. This means that if the images were truly taken on the moon, NASA would have had to use an advanced lighting technology, a technology that even today we struggle to replicate accurately. Another factor that fuels suspicion is the absence of stars in the lunar sky. If you were on the moon, far from Earth's light pollution, you would expect to see a sky full of stars, right? Yet, in all official Apollo mission photos, the sky appears completely black. NASA justifies this by saying that the camera exposure was set to capture the brightness of the surface, making the stars invisible. But if that were true, why then are there no records of photos taken with the correct exposure to capture the stars? After all, if they were really on the moon, wouldn't they have at least some interest in documenting the space around them? Now think about this. If these shadows truly don't make sense, if there is something wrong with the lighting, then what does this mean? Are we looking at an innocent photographic anomaly, or are these inconsistencies evidence that everything was nothing more than a meticulously planned spectacle? Now, imagine the scene: an astronaut planting the United States flag on the lunar surface. An iconic moment, a symbol of humanity's victory over the unknown. But suddenly, something catches your attention. The flag flutters as if it's being blown by the wind. There's just one problem: there is no wind on the moon. So what are we really seeing in these images? NASA justified this phenomenon by saying that the flag was made of a special material, reinforced with a horizontal rod to keep it stretched out. Additionally, they claimed that the movement was caused by the vibration generated by the astronauts themselves as they planted it into the ground. Sounds like a plausible explanation, right? But does it really hold up? If it were just a matter of vibration, the flag's fabric should move for a short period and then stop completely. But some footage appears to show the flag swaying for a considerable time, as if responding to an invisible air current. This shouldn't be possible in an airless environment. So, are we witnessing an unknown physical effect, or something that shouldn't be there? And there's another interesting detail. In some photos, the flag appears to be positioned one way, while in others, it's tilted differently, even though no one touched it. How is this possible? Could we be seeing continuity inconsistencies, something that commonly happens in film productions when scenes are shot separately and small details escape the crew's attention? Another question that raises suspicion is the texture of the fabric itself. If we look closely, the flag appears to have creases and wrinkles, as if it had been crumpled before being stretched out. That alone wouldn't be strange, but here's the problem. If the flag was transported folded inside the lunar module and stretched when planted, why didn't it return completely to its original position? In an airless environment, there's no resistance to keep a fabric folded. But on Earth, there is. Now let's think about something even more intriguing. How was this scene filmed? The mission's cameras were either mounted on the astronauts' suits or placed on stands on the lunar module. They had automatic exposure and focus adjustments, but weren't manually operated like a typical camera. So how did they manage to capture the exact right moment from the best possible angle? Was it pure luck, or a planned scene like on a movie set? And there's another point few people mention: the lighting on the flag. If we analyze it closely, the top part of the fabric seems to receive slightly different lighting than the rest of the scene. This could be a simple effect of light reflecting off the lunar surface, or the result of an artificial light source positioned outside the frame. After all, if the only light source was the sun, why isn't the flag uniformly illuminated? Furthermore, the way the flag behaves in different missions also raises questions. In the Apollo 12, 14, 15, and 16 missions, the flag appears differently in each photo. In some, it is fully stretched, while in others, it appears to sag. What could be causing this change if there's no wind to move it? And what if I told you that, according to some researchers, the Apollo 11 flag simply disappeared? Reports suggest that the strong thrust generated by the ascent module when leaving the moon knocked over and burned the flag at the moment of liftoff. But if that happened, why has NASA never released images of this supposed impact? And why did other missions leave their flags on the surface without concern for this same effect? Now, let's consider an even deeper question. If the moon landing was real and the entire operation happened exactly as NASA says, why do so many doubts and contradictions arise over something as simple as a waving flag? Are we just witnessing a series of coincidences, or the greatest continuity error in history? Imagine that you have experienced the most extraordinary event in human history. You walked on another world, felt reduced gravity, saw Earth floating in space, and witnessed an environment no human had ever set foot in before. Now think, how would you react upon returning home? You would tell your story to everyone with excitement, answer questions enthusiastically, and share every detail of this unforgettable journey. But surprisingly, the Apollo 11 astronauts didn't act that way. Quite the opposite. Since returning to Earth, Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, and Michael Collins have exhibited unexpected behavior. At the post-mission press conference, the three appeared uncomfortable, nervous, even depressed. Smiles were absent, eye contact was avoided, and their tone of voice conveyed anything but excitement. But why? Watch the videos from that day. There's no sparkle in their eyes, no excitement. They look more like people hiding something than those who just made history. Neil Armstrong, the first man to step on the moon, was an experienced pilot and a reserved man, but his silence after the mission went beyond mere discretion. He rarely gave interviews and avoided speaking publicly about what he experienced on the lunar surface. Unlike other explorers who proudly shared their discoveries, Armstrong withdrew, as if carrying an invisible burden. Was he keeping a secret? Buzz Aldrin also displayed strange behavior over the years. Although he spoke about the mission more than Armstrong, in various interviews he showed signs of unease when discussing certain details. At times, he avoided direct answers, changed the subject, or simply ended the conversation abruptly when asked specific questions about the trip. On one occasion, a conspiracy theorist confronted Aldrin, asking him to swear on the Bible that he had been to the moon. His reaction? He punched the man in the face. This could be interpreted as an outburst of anger in response to provocation, but it could also indicate something deeper: guilt, fear, exhaustion. Another curious episode involves Michael Collins, the astronaut who remained in lunar orbit while his colleagues descended to the surface. Unlike the other two, Collins seemed less uncomfortable discussing the mission. But here's a detail: he never personally witnessed what happened on the surface. His account is based on what Armstrong and Aldrin told him, and perhaps that's why his demeanor was different. What if these three men were carrying a secret they couldn't reveal? The Apollo 11 mission was accompanied by countless technicians, engineers, and scientists. If the landing was staged, the astronauts would have just been pawns in a much larger game. But what if something happened up there, something that wasn't supposed to be told? Many believe the astronauts' hesitation doesn't stem from a hoax, but from something they actually saw on the moon. Rumors suggest that Armstrong and Aldrin reported seeing structures, or even mysterious lights, in places where there should have been nothing. Armstrong himself, in rare statements, has let slip enigmatic phrases about discoveries that humanity is not yet ready to understand. Another factor fueling suspicions is the fact that no astronauts from later Apollo missions behaved the same way. Some, like Alan Bean and Eugene Cernan, spoke openly about their experiences. So why did the three from Apollo 11, the first ones, the ones who changed history, react with such reservation? NASA, of course, has always denied any irregularities. They explained that Armstrong was naturally reclusive, that Aldrin faced personal struggles after the mission, and that Collins, not having landed on the surface, didn't experience the same psychological pressure. But are these justifications enough to explain the behavior of the men who achieved humanity's greatest feat? And what if the astronaut's silence isn't just a personality trait, but the shadow of something much bigger? Something that wasn't meant to be spoken of, and perhaps never will be. Think about it. If you wanted to stage humanity's greatest achievement and deceive billions of people, who would you hire to direct this production? You'd need someone with an impeccable eye for detail, a perfectionist obsessed with realism, someone capable of creating a spectacle so convincing that it would withstand scrutiny for decades. And what if that person was Stanley Kubrick? The director, known for his almost paranoid precision, had already stunned the world with 2001, A Space Odyssey, a film released in 1968, just 1 year before the Apollo 11 mission, that recreated the space environment with eerie authenticity. The realism of the scenes was so advanced for its time that many wonder, did Kubrick not only simulate space in cinema, but also in NASA's mission? Some intriguing pieces of evidence suggest this possibility. First, the cinematic technology used in 2001 was groundbreaking, developed by Kubrick himself with the help of NASA specialists. The front projection system and lighting effects in the film were so convincing that, in theory, they could have been used to simulate a moon landing in a controlled environment. This would explain why the shadows in the Apollo 11 images appear inconsistent, and why the videos have strange characteristics, such as the absence of stars in the sky. Furthermore, there's a theory that Kubrick left clues about his involvement in the alleged hoax. In The Shining, released in 1980, there is an iconic scene. Young Danny wears a sweater with the Apollo 11 mission logo while walking on a carpet that resembles NASA's launch pad. To some, this is no coincidence but a coded confession from Kubrick. But why would he do this? Was the director trying to subtly reveal something without putting himself in direct danger? If Kubrick truly helped NASA fake the moon landing, he would have become one of the most closely watched men in the world. Perhaps The Shining was his way of exposing the truth without having to say it outright. And there's more. Some researchers claim that after the release of 2001, A Space Odyssey, Kubrick became reclusive, avoiding interviews and maintaining an obsessive level of privacy. For a director of his caliber, wouldn't it be expected that he would bask in his fame and give more interviews about his work? What made him withdraw? Additionally, a curious detail about Kubrick's contract with Warner Brothers adds more fuel to the fire. He demanded in writing that all his films be preserved exactly as he conceived them and that no one could ever alter them. This raises a question. Did he fear that something in his films could be changed to erase potential clues he may have left behind? NASA, of course, has always denied any involvement with Kubrick beyond the technical consultations for 2001. But is this denial convincing? If the space agency needed to ensure that the world believed in the moon landing, it would do anything to protect the secret. And if all of this is true, what does it mean? Did humans never go to the moon? Or did they, but the images we were shown were created here on Earth? If Kubrick was truly behind the staging, it means that the entire history we know may have been carefully constructed, and that the real truth remains hidden, waiting to be uncovered. Imagine one of the most important events in human history. Something that cost billions of dollars, involved thousands of scientists, and was watched by millions of people around the world. Now consider the following question. Where are the original records of this historic moment? If you assume NASA would have safeguarded them with the utmost care, you might be shocked to learn that they simply vanished. For decades, space researchers and enthusiasts believed that the original tapes of the moon landing broadcast were safely archived. However, in 2006, NASA admitted something unbelievable. The recordings were erased or reused. Wait, so these guys spent billions to get to the moon and taped over the footage? Like an old VHS? Yes, the original footage of the first moon landing, one of humanity's most celebrated achievements, was supposedly recorded over, as if it were just some disposable tape. How is that possible? The official explanation is that during the 1970s and 80s, NASA faced a shortage of magnetic tapes and therefore reused old materials to save space and resources. But this justification raises more questions than answers. How could an event of this magnitude not have had a backup stored? If it was a milestone in space exploration history, why didn't anyone recognize the importance of preserving these images before it was too late? And it doesn't stop there. In addition to the erased tapes, numerous technical documents from the Apollo missions have also disappeared over the years. Detailed schematics of the lunar module, studies on deep space radiation effects, even the original spacecraft test records, all gone without explanation. How does a program of such scale lose so many critical records? For skeptics, this series of administrative errors is, at the very least, suspicious. What if these images and documents weren't lost, but intentionally destroyed? Could there have been something in these recordings that couldn't be revealed? Another intriguing issue involves the quality of the images that reached the public. The original tapes had a much higher resolution than what was broadcast on television in 1969. However, the only footage we have today are low-quality copies obtained from second-hand recordings. Why did NASA never release high-definition versions before the tapes disappeared? Moreover, some experts have pointed out inconsistencies in the available footage. The astronauts' movements appear irregular, as if they were manipulated. In some scenes, when the videos are sped up, the astronauts seem to walk normally, as if they were simply jumping in slow motion. This raises a question. Was the low-gravity effect simulated using filming techniques, something commonly used in movie productions? And there's another strange detail. The moon landing transmissions were sent to Earth using a special video signal format that had to be converted before being broadcast to the public. The problem? The only equipment capable of converting these images was dismantled years later, making it impossible to reanalyze the original signals. Why dismantle such a valuable device without first ensuring all materials were properly preserved? To make matters worse, NASA engineers have admitted in interviews that they no longer possess the exact blueprints of the lunar module. They simply don't know how to recreate the technology used in the 1960s to take humans to the moon. In a shocking statement, one engineer said the agency destroyed that technology and it would be a great challenge to rebuild it. What does that mean? Did we lose the knowledge to return to the moon? Or did we never actually have it in the first place? If these tapes were never truly erased, then where are they? Are they hidden in some secret vault, far from public scrutiny? Were they destroyed to prevent anyone from analyzing them with modern technology? If they were accidentally lost, how do we explain the disappearance of so many other crucial records? And what if the truth lies within these missing files? What did NASA want to hide? Now, imagine working behind the scenes of one of humanity's greatest achievements. You witness top-secret documents, overhear conversations that should never be leaked, and see things the world was never meant to know. But as time goes by, your conscience weighs on you. What would you do? Keep the secret forever or risk everything to reveal the truth? Over the years, various individuals who supposedly worked at NASA or in companies linked to the Apollo program have come forward. Their stories vary, but they all point to the same mystery. Something about the moon landing is not exactly as we were told. One of the most famous accounts comes from Bill Kaysing, a former employee of one of NASA's contracted companies in the 1960s. He claimed that the space agency never actually had the capability to send humans to the moon, and that the footage was produced in secret studios. According to Kaysing, the US government was so obsessed with winning the space race against the Soviet Union that it faked the landing to maintain global superiority. But he wasn't the only one to raise suspicions. Other former employees have mentioned strange secrecy orders, veiled threats, and documents that simply vanished from archives. One ex-engineer who worked on converting the Apollo 11 mission's video signals stated that the original footage was much clearer than the versions released to the public. According to him, before he could finish his work, the material was collected by officials and never seen again. And there's an even stranger case. Ken Johnston, a former manager of NASA's photographic archives, claimed that Apollo astronauts took thousands of photos of the moon, including images of anomalous structures on the surface. According to him, these photos were later altered or destroyed to prevent the public from knowing what was really found there. He alleges that he was pressured to clean up the archives and refused, costing him his job. Another intriguing testimony came from a former NSA, National Security Agency, employee who monitored space radio transmissions. According to her, part of the communications between the Apollo 11 astronauts and mission control on Earth was censored. Rumors suggest that, during a moment of silence in the public transmissions, Armstrong and Aldrin described strange lights and objects surrounding them. But if this really happened, why have these recordings never been made public? And then comes the most unsettling question: why did so many of these witnesses face difficulties after speaking out? Bill Kaysing was ridiculed until his death. Ken Johnston had his credibility attacked. Other former employees who hinted at irregularities lost their jobs or were publicly discredited. Coincidence, or a coordinated effort to silence those who knew too much? NASA, of course, denies all these claims, calling them baseless conspiracy theories. But the question remains: why do so many people who were close to the Apollo program speak of mysteries and concealed information? If these accounts are true, it would mean the entire world was deceived. But if they are just unfounded stories, why so many risks, so many threats, and such resistance to simply opening all the files for public investigation? What did these witnesses really see? And more importantly, what do we still not know? For decades, we have been taught to believe that the moon landing was one of humanity's greatest moments. But as we delve into hidden details, controversial evidence, and deafening silences, we begin to wonder: did we see the truth, or only what they wanted us to see? Whether it was a cinematic hoax or an even deeper secret, something about the Apollo 11 mission doesn't quite add up. The mismatched shadows, the waving flag, the missing archives, the insider testimonies, all of these form an incomplete puzzle, with pieces that seem to have been deliberately removed. And if what we know is just a carefully constructed version, what if the real story is hidden waiting to be uncovered? Perhaps, one day, someone will find the missing piece. But the question is, will we be ready for the answer? This story is just one piece, and one day, perhaps you will see the entire puzzle. If this made you think, subscribe, like the video. This helps the channel grow. Don't forget to share, because after all, more voices mean more discoveries.